Ladies, gentlemen, and all you internet trolls out there, it is Fan Fridays, the show where I give outsiders an inside look into the mind of an MLB All-Star. Do you know my rating in MLB The Show? Do I even know my rating in MLB The Show? Why is that? I got that answer and many more right after the break. Stay tuned. All right, as always, we've got some YouTube questions. First, question number 1, what are ball players doing to stay in shape during the quarantine? Some ball players are not doing anything to stay in shape during the quarantine, and I think that's a mistake. I've seen some people talking about, challenging themselves to see how long they can sit on their couch and play video games in a row. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. There's plenty of ways you can work out right now. You got to stay in shape because the season might be back. It might be canceled. Who knows? But if the season comes back and you have not stayed in shape, you're at a huge risk of injury. And, injury is the worst thing, but then your performance just isn't going to be there. Also, when do you get 9 months of uninterrupted development time? Let's see. If you didn't make the playoffs last year, you've had October, November, December, January, February, March, April. Baseball might not be back till you got May, June. If it's not back till July, you got 9 months of development time. At no time in your baseball history have you had 9 months of development time in a row. That's a lot you can get done. So I'm trying to maximize it. Guys are working out in their home gyms. I've seen a lot of guys doing stuff like that, med ball work, or if they have some plates or a barbell just set up in their garage, they're doing that. Some guys are going to the beach. If they're by the beach and running sand, running in the sand or working out there. People are trying to be responsible. Obviously, public gyms are closed down, facilities are closed down, so everyone's being responsible about it. But Joey Gallo had that video of him hitting in his house. He set up a net and a tee, and he was hitting inside his condo or apartment or whatever it was. Looked pretty sweet. So I like that video. Guys are just getting creative. The Reds strength coaches and athletic training staff and stuff like that have done a really good job of giving us workouts that we can do. Mental workouts, physical workouts, nutrition, stuff like that. They're in constant communication with us, so that's been super helpful. I'm sure every team has personnel that's in charge of doing the same thing for their players as we try to navigate this time. So those are some of the things. I'm missing a ton of them, obviously, but just some of the things that I've seen that I know of personally. Question number 2, how would playing season games in Arizona in spring training facilities affect the level of play during the game? And I think this is a really interesting question because there's a lot of different things that go into it. One, the level of play during the game, especially if there's no fans, would be different. Adrenaline is different when it matters. So there's a jump from spring training games that we know don't matter to regular season games that do matter. But then every time you have the crowd going crazy, then you get another bump of adrenaline. So the game wouldn't be played at nearly as high a level without the fans. It would be very odd. It'd be somewhat distracting, I think, for a lot of guys because we've never played in front of no fans. Even in the minor leagues, when you draw 5 fans to a 10 o'clock game on Wednesday in the middle of the summer, there's still some fans there. So that part would be weird. The facilities part, spring training facilities aren't set up to house major league teams for series on end, 3-game series or 4-game series. The dugouts aren't set up to be able to house cooling devices, fans, the amount of, what would I say? So you have ammonia buckets with towels in them, so you need a lot of stuff to handle the heat in Arizona. So dugouts aren't set up for that. They aren't set up for shade. There's no video rooms there at the field, so you wouldn't be able to check video. Half the facilities are separated where the stadium is down the street from the actual clubhouse. So you'd have players that couldn't even go back to the clubhouse, which means you can't go up and get a snack in the middle of the game, get extra hydration. You'd have to bring everything to the dugout with you, and then it would be out there in the sun. There's a lot of problems with it, and it would affect the level of play. Maybe not in the first game as much as it would in the 30th game or the 60th game. As it wore on in the heat, and these things started to pile up, the level of play on the field would be changed a lot. And there's a lot of things that I'm missing too. The travel is part of it. Our families, would families be able to be involved and be here, or, where would guys live? There's a lot of different things that go into this. So that's what I think, though, just some brief thoughts without spending the entire video talking about all the different permutations of potentially playing in Arizona for the season. All right, question number 3. Can you talk about how you adopted your arm path? Yeah, I'll keep it brief because this is like a years-long process. But basically, I came to the conclusion at some point that nothing really matters until my front foot hits. So I just need to have my arm in a position that it can work for me when my front foot strikes the ground. And so I just decided to look at the position that my arm was in at that point and then just keep my arm in that position basically the entire time. So I basically just dropped the ball out of my glove and let it just kind of end up in this position. I used to get it super long and kind of drop it down behind my back and do a bunch of stuff with it, but all that was just wasted motion and stuff that frankly was inconsistent. I couldn't do it the same every time. Whereas now when I drop the ball out of my glove, it just kind of hangs out here in a consistent position, and then it's a lot easier to whip it up into this cocked position at the point when my front foot hits. So that was my decision-making process. If you understand that you can't generate velocity until your front foot hits, then nothing really about arm action matters. Just keep it short and get it to the right position at the right time so it can work for you. All right, now for some questions from my fans at trevorbauer.com. Johnny Azel asks, what do you think was the biggest difference between you in 2018 and 2019? How do you plan to get back to Cy Young caliber in 2020? I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying this, but the biggest difference was probably luck. I was not as good in 2019. I didn't execute the pitches as well. But when you go back and you look at the sequence in which things happened in 2018 versus the sequence that they happened in 2019, there's certain games where the underlying stats look very similar. 6 innings pitched, 6 hits, 8 strikeouts, and 2 walks. But in 2019, those 6 hits would all come in a row, and I would give up 5 runs. And in 2018, they would come 1 an inning, and I wouldn't give up any runs. That's not necessarily my fault. It could be my fault. Maybe I just didn't execute really well that inning for whatever reason. But the sequence in which things happens, if you give up 2 home runs in a game and they're both solo shots, that's only 2 runs. But if you give up 2 homers and there's 3 people on base each time, that's 8 runs. And so if all the hits get stacked into one inning, then you're at a lot more risk of giving up a lot of runs, which seemed to happen to me a lot in 2019. The other thing is I was hurt the vast majority of the year. 2018, when I got hurt, when I got hit with the line drive, I was just out. I didn't pitch. 2019, I got hurt in my 4th start of the year, and I pitched injured basically the rest of the year. So those were 2 of the biggest differences. As far as how that manifested itself on the field, I was behind a lot more. I was in bad pitcher counts or good hitter counts. I wasn't able to command the ball as precisely as I would like, so I had to try to get more of the plate to be able to throw a strike, as opposed to being able to hit the black consistently, or as consistently as I did in 2018. So these are all things that contributed to me not being as good, and all things that will be better once I'm healthy and can move the way I need to move and do that consistently and train the way I need to train and all these different things. But yeah, that's a brief rundown, not to get too much in the weeds for you. Next up is Brandon Lazardi, who says, if you could add any pitch to your repertoire, what pitch would you add and why? I don't want to add any more pitches to my repertoire. I'm very happy with where my pitches are at. If I could, though, if I had to give you an answer, I would add a changeup, a Pedro Martinez changeup, or a Luis Castillo style changeup, Steven Strasburg, something like that. Something that has good run and a lot of depth to it. That's the one pitch I haven't really been able to figure out for whatever reason at my arm slot. It's just not working out for me. I'm hoping my changeup this year will be better. I've had a lot of time to work on it, and it is better. Hopefully it'll last throughout the season, unlike it did in 2019. But I'm pretty happy with the rest of my stuff. I mean, I could say that I'd add Aroldis Chapman's fastball to my repertoire and just throw it 10 miles an hour harder. That'd be great. But I'm actually pretty happy with where my stuff's at right now. I don't need to add any more pitch types. I could make my pitch types better, but that's just small little tweaks. I don't need to add anything new at this point. Sean Fitzgerald, who says, so when teams and players are discussing an extension into the season and they say it becomes a distraction and they table talks, I'm curious as to how it takes away from performance on the field. Are the players more in the loop than it seems from a fan perspective rather than just letting their agent handle negotiations? And say if an offer is on the table or not, I assume there's more focus needed from the player behind the scenes. Man, I don't know how I read that whole thing and didn't mess it up more than I already did. That's a long question and a very in-depth one. I've never been through that, so I can't speak from personal experience on that one. I do know that agents inform the players of all the different negotiations that are going on, and it'll take a form something like this. Agent will call the player and say, hey, they offered you 10. And the player's like, I'm worth way more than that. And the agent's like, yeah, I know. We're going to go back with 20. And the player says, okay, great. But that conversation will go on for 20 or 30 minutes discussing strategy on why they think this and what the team was saying and blah, blah, blah. So the agent will go back to the team and the team will say, no, come on. 20 is way too much. That's way too much. We can go to 11, but no more than that. And then the agent comes back to the player and says, they said they'd go to 11. And then the player's upset because the player feels he's worth 20. And then he has another half an hour call or an hour call when they get someone else on the phone. And then usually there's multiple people at an agency, so you might talk to your specific agent, but then the other person, the stats guy, might want to talk to you about why the team's saying this and whatever. And then the player might get some bad feelings towards the team because they're not valuing him the way he values himself. And then, so it just gets complicated. It depends on the player a lot. If he has ego tied to how much he's worth, or if he really cares about that, or if he's just really focused on playing baseball and doesn't care as much about the money or really what the player's temperament is. Some people look at it as a purely business negotiation and it's a logical thing and they understand it and they don't get emotionally upset about it. Some people get very emotionally upset about it. And neither is the right or the wrong way. It's just difference in personalities. So that's some of the reason why talks kind of get tabled throughout the season. Players want to focus on baseball. That comes with a certain kind of routine that they're used to. Generally, it's because the team isn't offering the player what he wants. So the player wants to go out and make sure and perform extra well that year to prove that he's worth it. And so there's a lot of added pressure there, and time commitment to talking to your agent a lot about contract negotiations can get distracting. So that's the best I can give you without having any personal experience with it yet. Yeah, I guess that's all I have on that front. So, all right, next up, Carrington Martin says, football players tend to play a ton of video games. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Football players tend to play a ton of the video game Madden Football, as well as obsess over their own Madden ratings. Would you say baseball players treat MLB The Show video game series the same? And do you know my overall rating, do I know my overall rating in the game? Man, I stumbled through that one. Let's see. I don't know exactly. I know there's a lot of baseball players that game. The problem is we have a game every single day, so we don't have as much uninterrupted time to do other things. Football, you play once a week-ish, and yeah, you have practice and whatnot, but you're not there for 8 or 10 hours a day, at least as far as I know. I could be wrong on that. So if I'm wrong, please correct me, any football players out there. But NBA, you have more time to play because you play every third night or something like that. Baseball's a little bit different. Not a whole lot of guys have time to jump into one specific thing because we play every single day, every single night. So I don't think that MLB players are nearly as invested in video games. Specifically, MLB The Show. I think guys play Fortnite a lot, or they stream. I know some guys stream. I don't know. I'm not big into the video game world, so I don't know a whole lot about that. As far as if I know my rating in MLB The Show, no, I do not know my rating in MLB The Show. I've actually never played MLB The Show. I don't think I've played a baseball video game or a sports video game in 15 or 20 years. I can't remember. I may never have played a sports video game, actually. I was always interested more in Call of Duty or racing games, or I played Spyro a lot as a kid. But yeah, I think football players are a little bit more in tune with Madden than baseball players are with MLB The Show. That's just my guess. I could be way off on that. Now that I've answered all y'all's questions, I have a question for you, and I want to know what your proposal to get baseball back as soon as possible is. Radical proposals, not radical. Should we wait till everything's cleared and risk not having a season? Should we play all the games on a private island like the UFC was trying to do with fights? Radical or not, or whatever, reasonable, I don't care. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. I want to hear all your crazy proposals. So leave those in the comments below. Give me a like, turn on notifications, hit that little bell thingy down there so you know that I posted new content. I'm posting a lot of content for you guys right now, so make sure you don't miss out on any of that. If you'd like a shout out in a future video, go on over to trevorbauer.com, sign up for my email list, and submit your question on the homepage. I'll shout you out in a future video. And other than that, I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2020. So if you can hit that subscribe button or tell your friends about this channel or someone who might be interested in content like this or any of the content I have, that would be greatly appreciated. And before I ramble anymore, I will see you guys in the next video. Stay safe.